243 people, gone in just 8 days. In the suffocating heat of July, the Denver metropolitan area became the scene of one of the largest immigration enforcement actions the region had witnessed in years. ICE led a sweeping operation that pulled in not only its enforcement and removal operations, but also Homeland Security Investigations, Denver U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the IRS, and backup from ICE's Dallas field office. The scale was massive and the impact was immediate. According to ICE, these weren't random detentions. Officials said every person taken into custody had criminal charges or convictions, some for extremely serious crimes. The list included murder, human trafficking, sexual assault, child exploitation, and drug-related offenses. Others were accused of assault, theft, driving under the influence, and a variety of other offenses. What made this operation even more controversial was the fact that many of those arrested had already been in custody before, sometimes for the same crimes, but had been released back into the community. The reason? Colorado's sanctuary laws. These laws limit local law enforcement from cooperating directly with federal immigration authorities, meaning ICE often isn't notified when undocumented individuals are released from local jails. For ICE, it's a point of frustration. For advocates of sanctuary policies, it's a way to build trust between immigrant communities and local police. This clash of priorities, federal immigration enforcement versus state sanctuary protections, has been a flashpoint for years. But in Denver this July, it took on a sharper edge. ICE framed the arrests as necessary to protect public safety, pointing to the serious nature of many charges. Supporters of the operation said this is exactly why ICE exists, to identify and remove individuals who pose a threat to national security and public safety. But not everyone saw it that way. Just months earlier, in February, Colorado had already been at the center of national attention for another wave of ICE raids. Those operations sparked large, loud protests in places like Aurora. Thousands marched under banners that read "Fight for our neighbors," accusing ICE of creating fear in immigrant communities and tearing families apart. Volunteer legal groups, like the Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocacy Network, mobilized quickly to provide assistance and track enforcement activity. That same spirit of resistance was still alive when news of the Denver arrests broke. Activists called it another example of the federal government targeting communities already living in fear. They argued that such large-scale sweeps can lead to collateral damage, with people picked up in the process who may not pose any danger at all. For many in Denver's immigrant neighborhoods, the raids reinforced a message: be careful, stay inside, don't trust the knock at your door. Nationwide, these enforcement actions have become a defining feature of the current political climate. In sanctuary cities across the country, ICE operations are often met with public outrage, legal challenges, and political pushback. Supporters of aggressive enforcement counter that immigration law is federal law, and states can't simply ignore it. It's a bitter, long-running debate over the limits of state autonomy, the scope of federal power, and the meaning of public safety. What makes the Denver case stand out is the combination of scale, severity, and timing. In just over a week, nearly 2,500 people were taken into custody. ICE highlighted cases of individuals wanted for violent crimes or serious felonies, stories designed to make the public see these arrests as essential. Yet critics noted that the operation didn't just target people with violent records. As in many sweeps, the net caught a range of individuals, some with lesser offenses, and some whose charges had not yet been proven in court. This leads to the heart of the public divide. For ICE, the mission is clear: identify, detain, and remove undocumented immigrants who present a risk. The agency says the operation in Denver was an example of that mission at work. For immigrant advocates, the mission looks very different: protect vulnerable communities from what they see as heavy-handed enforcement that undermines trust and safety. Colorado's sanctuary laws have only deepened this divide. Passed to protect immigrant residents, they limit when and how local authorities can cooperate with ICE. Police and sheriff's departments are generally not allowed to hold someone longer just because ICE requests it, unless there's a judicial warrant. Proponents say this ensures local police focus on community safety, not immigration status, and encourages immigrants to report crimes without fear of deportation. Opponents argue it allows dangerous individuals to slip through the cracks. In this Denver operation, ICE was quick to point out that many of those arrested had indeed slipped through. They had been in local custody for crimes, sometimes serious ones, and were released without ICE being notified. ICE's regional leadership argued that this not only undermines enforcement but endangers the public. Critics responded that ICE can and should obtain warrants like any other law enforcement agency, and that detaining people without one risks violating constitutional rights. Beyond the legal and political arguments, there's the human reality. For the families of those arrested, the sweeps brought sudden disruption and fear. Homes were left with missing parents, children faced uncertainty, and communities were left wondering who might be next. Activist groups set up hotlines, offered legal workshops, and organized rallies in response. The protests in Aurora earlier in the year became a rallying point again, with calls for the public to stand against what they saw as unjust targeting. For Denver's broader community, reactions were mixed. Some residents expressed relief, saying the removal of dangerous offenders made neighborhoods safer. Others felt the raids sowed division and fear, particularly in communities where undocumented immigrants live and work alongside citizens every day. Local media coverage reflected this split, highlighting both ICE's list of serious charges and the voices of those who said the sweeps were overly broad and deeply disruptive. The Denver operation also fit into a larger national strategy. Across the country, ICE has been stepping up enforcement actions, especially in areas where local laws limit cooperation. The agency has been clear that sanctuary jurisdictions are a priority target, both to remove offenders and to send a message. For immigrant rights groups, that message is one of intimidation, proof that the federal government is willing to push hard against local protections. In politics, the operation brought back the same old arguments. People who want tougher immigration rules said these arrests prove why sanctuary laws can be risky, especially because some of the people caught were charged with serious crimes. They said it makes sense, if someone is in the country illegally and breaks the law in a big way, they should be deported. But critics disagreed. They said it's important to remember that everyone deserves a fair legal process, that not everyone arrested has been found guilty, and that sometimes ICE arrests people just because they don't have legal papers, not because they did something wrong. On the ground, the operation was carried out with precision. Different law enforcement groups worked together to find and arrest specific people who had criminal records. ICE shared information about the crimes these people were accused of, like violence and drug dealing. But beyond the arrests, the bigger story in the news and protests was about what these actions say about who America is and what it stands for, how enforcing immigration laws affects the country's values and identity. In Denver's immigrant neighborhoods, trust in the police was already weak. These arrests made that mistrust even worse. Community leaders warned that people might stop calling the police or helping with investigations if they fear any contact with officers could lead to ICE getting involved. Police officials said, though, that dangerous criminals need to be removed from the streets, no matter their immigration status. This tension isn't just in Denver. Many U.S. cities with sanctuary laws face the same problems, the same ICE raids, and the same political fights. The Denver arrests became part of a bigger story, testing how far the federal government will go and how communities will react. In the days after the operation, rallies were held in parts of Colorado, echoing the earlier protests in Aurora. Signs read "Immigrants are welcome here" and "Stop tearing families apart." Speakers urged attendees to pressure lawmakers to strengthen sanctuary protections and limit ICE's reach. Meanwhile, ICE stood by its actions, releasing statements highlighting the most serious offenders and insisting that their mission is to protect public safety. That contrast between the human stories of fear and loss and the law and order framing of public safety is where the debate continues to burn. For those who support ICE's work, the Denver operation was proof of effective law enforcement. For those who oppose it, it was another chapter in a long history of targeting marginalized communities. What's clear is that the issue is not going away. Immigration policy, sanctuary laws, and federal enforcement will remain at the center of political discourse for the foreseeable future. The Denver arrests revealed how these problems clash in real and often painful ways, on neighborhood streets, in courtrooms, and inside homes, where families wait anxiously, unsure if their loved ones will return. In the end, The Denver operation might be remembered less for the numbers, 243 arrests and many serious charges, and more for highlighting a deep national divide. On one side, people believe strong enforcement is necessary for safety and law. On the other, many see such actions as unfair, harmful, and hurting the communities they aim to protect. As Denver moves forward, the impact of that week in July will stay with the community. For ICE, it was a mission accomplished. For many immigrant families, it was a reminder that safety feels fragile. And for the whole country, it showed that the fight over immigration laws, enforcement, and its human cost is far from over. Behind the numbers are real stories of crimes, fears, protections, and struggles. So the question remains, how do we want to be a country? Do we prove our strength by strict law enforcement, or by balancing it with fairness, compassion, and respect for people's rights?